So let's talk about how to figure out what size chain you need for your chainsaw if you can't read the markings on your bar. So one real nice thing is a lot of the chainsaw chain manufacturers will stamp some vital information on the chain. Sometimes it's located on the drive link, sometimes there's even some information on the cutter tooth itself. And they often have some sort of encoding that will allow you to figure out quickly what that is. So let's take a look at a Carlton chain, and we'll also take a look at an Oregon chain. I don't have any steel chains with me, but each manufacturer seems to have their own encoding. So just taking a look at this chain here real quick, we'll take a look at the drive links. If you're not very familiar with what drive links are, that's actually the part that goes into your bar, and it's these little bottom pieces here. If you look at this chain, this has K3 stamped on. So this gives me a pretty good idea that this is a Carlton chain. That just seems to be one of their stamping conventions, K1, K2, K3. And if we jump online and just take a real quick look at the reference guide, this will tell us what our pitch and our gauge is. So here's one more quick example. This is an Oregon chain, and if you look really closely, you can see the number 22 on the drive link. I think steel does, they're slightly different, but they do the same type of thing, but they might have like an extra item in there or something. I'm not super familiar with steel chains. So in the description below, I'll put links to some of the common chains, Carlton, steel, in Oregon, and reference guides for these, so you can look at these numbers and figure out what you need. So if you're looking for that, take a look in the description below. So you might be asking yourself, what the heck is chain pitch and chain gauge? Well, chain gauge is basically the thickness of these drive links that go into the slot of your bar. In the pitch, the way they calculate that is they take the distance between 3 rivets and they divide that by 2. And the reason that's important is because the circumference or you know, the shape of your sprocket and the nose of your bar. So one other thing we have to do is actually figure out how many drive links are on this chain. This chain right here goes on my 20-inch bar of my saw. And like I said, you know, these are the drive links. These aren't always even numbers. For example, I know this one has 81 drive links. A lot of times you can kind of count in twos, 2, 4, 6, 8, and figure out actually how many you have. You know, in reality, you're just counting how many of these drive links are on there. And this will vary from bar size. You know, this one, like I said, it's got 81. I think my 16-inch bar, I have to run, I don't know, is it 61 or 67 drive links or something? I don't know, I have to go back and count now. So having this information, having your pitch, having your gauge, and number of drive links, you can pretty much plug that into the web and figure out a chain that will at least run on your saw. And then it's figuring out what's the most ideal cutter tooth type setup for your saw. And we'll talk a little bit about that here. So now that we got the pitch and the gauge figured out, there's a couple things that we need to take in consideration. That's whether this is a skip tooth chain and the type of cutter head that is actually on there. If you're not familiar with what a skip tooth chain is, we got a cutter tooth here, and a cutter tooth here. Basically a skip tooth chain, every other one will be missing. And oftentimes you'll find this on chains that are run on bars 29 inches or larger, or sometimes you'll even see them on chainsaws where they try to squeeze a little bit of a larger bar on a not so powerful motor. A lot of guys think, oh, you get a faster cut. Basically what it really does is it allows your saw to run at a higher RPM because less actually being taken out. You know, there's, instead of 3 teeth there, you end up with 2 teeth. So let's talk a little bit about cutter teeth now. When dealing with firewood, you're often either dealing with a semi-chisel tooth chain or a full chisel tooth chain. And there's pros and cons to both of them. A semi-chisel tooth chain will stay sharper a little bit longer, but it will cut a little bit slower. A full chisel tooth chain will dull quicker, but cut a little bit faster. They say semi-chisel tooth chains are a little bit more ideal for softer woods and dirtier wood, and a full chisel tooth chain is a little bit more ideal for harder woods and clean wood. So for us, we get a lot of wind-blown trees around here. I've been starting to use a semi-chisel tooth chain. I originally, when I first started cutting, I was always like, I gotta run a full chisel tooth chain. I'm gonna save myself all this time because it cuts faster. I've noticed out here with the size trees we have, I see maybe a 2 to 4 second difference in cutting time. So let's say I take down a tree and I cut up, 20 rounds or something out of that tree. Time, 20, 30 times, 2 to 4 seconds. What are we talking here? Minute and a half, 2 minutes difference. However, I can't sharpen a chain in less than 2 minutes. So, however, I have not noticed that much of an extended period of time with semi-chisel, like how long it stays sharp, I guess. So that's another thing to think about. So the last thing to think about is whether to do a safety type or a low kickback chain. The most dangerous part of your chainsaw, well, other than the cutting teeth themselves, is the actual nose or the tip of your bar. A lot of times if you go in there and you catch it, it can bite and throw that saw right back at you. That's why they have the anti-kickback safety mechanism on the top of your saw. So they put something extra in the chain to help kind of eliminate that tip of your saw from being as high of a risk of a kickback. However, there are some limitations. A lot of times it can be very difficult, if not impossible, to do bore or plunge type cuts. It's kind of like where you take your nose and drive that in there. A lot of times you'll use that when you're in a situation where you're trying to prevent a tree from barber chairing. So I definitely recommend using a safety chain, especially if you're pretty new or inexperienced or don't even know when to make those plunge type cuts. There's no point in putting your life in more risk just going out gathering a little firewood. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope this was helpful. If so, let me know by clicking that thumbs up and subscribing. Thanks for watching.